Vou apresentar o nosso próximo palestrante, ele é Nemias Mol, do Brasil. Nemias Mol é leitor do livro do Urantia desde o ano de 2001. Ele é o criador e mantenedor do grupo ELUB, Estudantes do Livro do Urantia no Brasil. Ele atuou como vice-presidente da Urantia Associação do Brasil entre o ano 2004 e 2008, e como presidente de 2008 a 2012. Atualmente pertence ao Conselho Representativo da Associação do Brasil e é diretor da Escola Urantia.
Gostaria, em primeiro lugar, agradecer a oportunidade de estar aqui com vocês, compartilhar um pouquinho do livro de Urantia com os nossos irmãos. É sempre uma honra participar com vocês aqui.
When I was going to present, I started to think about a topic. So my topic is every day, every time whiter. So people ask me, what is the meaning of that title? Ever more white, every time more white. Well, the first slide that I'm going to present is going to talk about the title itself. The Urantia book tells us in document 195 that when you observe the words, remember that black dots of evil can actually be outmade by white. But you don't simply see white stains above a black background. So even though some of the pessimists can observe the world like if it was a dark world with many wars, with many battles, with lots of crime and evil, even while of this, the light will always prevail. So I'm here to present and the work and demonstrate that our reality, we have a universe of faith. We're in an imperfect universe, yes, which was imperfect on purpose. It's just our job to make it perfect. We're in a system that has suffered from rebellions and we're isolated. But despite all of this, we're in a decimal planet, an experimental world. We had our prince rebel. We had the Lucifer rebellion. And we've seen how many different failures have affected our world. So what I wanted to present is that our world continues to progress despite all of the chaos, and it's greater and greater. It becomes wider, and the dark stains continue to erode little by little. And the Christian panorama, and many of us that came from Christian background, I know many of us came from Christian backgrounds, but in Brazil, the prevalence is obviously Christianity and Catholicism, and the vision that Christians have about the world is to be preparing yourselves for the end, or preparing ourselves for revelation, for the worst to come. In the end of times, or the end of the days, this is a panorama in Revelations. So the mission of Christianity is to prepare us for the end of times and the second coming, where he is going to come and put everything into order. And most of us agree that we're if we agree with Christianity, we see we're in the beginning of the pain. So the prophecies talk about wars, and we say we're going to see false prophets. So then we would actually come into the last phase of this part of Revelation according to what the Christian church believes. So then in the arrival of Jesus, we would have a resurrection, and then we will have 1,000 years of godly government. Then the final judgment would come, and then we will have a second resurrection, and then some would go into an eternal fire. Well, that's what Christian theology teaches. But what does the Urantia book say? It makes it clear that in our planet, it wasn't created to be destroyed. It was created for success. It was created for evolution. It was created to enter a time of light and life. There's actually a huge and glorious purpose for our universe. We're all part of a greater plan. We're all part of an eternal project that the gods are supervising and they're executing as we speak. In the minds of God, there's a plan that embraces all creatures of all of his dominions, and that plan has an eternal purpose, full of progress and opportunities, unlimited and eternal life. A plan that has for our planets, for all the planets of the universe of time and space. It's a plan to achieve the light and life. It's never a plan for eternal destruction or the end of the world. That is not what is taught in the Urantia book. When we look at the history of our country, which begins 400 billion years ago, it began with the creator himself choosing one of the nebulas, the Andronova, to build his local universe called Nebadon. Then let's jump to about 6 billion years ago, when the birth of the sun. And 4,500 years ago, we see the planet Urantia be born, and life was implanted 550 million years ago. That's part of the project. Obviously, we started to see evolution. Everything takes time. Evolution is something that is slow. It's a long-lasting process. 50 million years ago, we see the first mammals. 1 million years ago, we see the first human couple and then Infanta. Then 500 years ago, the planetary prince arrived. 200,000 years ago, we see the Lucifer rebellion, where all of this work almost went to shambles and was interrupted. 37,935,000 years ago, we see the arrival of Adam and Eve, and they also defaulted close to 100 years after their arrival. So if we continue the timeline, about 4,000 years ago, 500,000 years ago, remember, we see Adam and Eve, 37,000 years, and the second revelation, 4,000 years ago, by Macaventa Melchizedek. Then the Melchizedek arrived, which was the third revelation, 2027 years ago, which is the arrival of the Creator's Son bestowed onto Urantia, which was the fourth epical revelation. And 87 years ago, in more or less 1934, we see the Urantia book arrive, which is the fifth epical revelation. Very well. So we know that Adam and Eve defaulted in their mission. We know that our planetary prince also fell into rebellion, and many different things went wrong. They left the natural evolutionary course that we should have gone through as a normal planet. And we know that that is a fact. But if they would have never failed, what could we have expected if we had no default? The book says that the purpose, or the main purpose, of the Adamic regime was to influence man in their evolution, taking us to the plenitude of state and civilization, hunters and gatherers, turn them into farmers and horticultures, and then later on get man ready for the following phases and industrial phases. Apart from the implementations, and to teach man and promote civilizations and promote industrial development by civilization. So the Urantia book teaches that Adam and Eve would need about 10,000 years to promote a marvelous evolution on our planet. 10 years of work would be all we needed to have this marvelous transformation. And this would have occurred 28,000 years ago. And the book says that 25,000 years of an Adam and Eve on our planet would generally make a planet mature and ripe. And this would have happened about 13,000 years ago. So if Adam and Eve would have never defaulted, our planet should have been at this moment in thesis, according to this document, about 25,000 years after their arrival, we would have seen another planetary, another sun be, the magisterial sun come to this earth. So what would the magisterial sun would have done? We would have actually progressed quite a bit. Right now, we would probably be with at the face of the magisterial sun, but unfortunately, that did not happen. But the oldest city that we have news of is about 12,000 years ago, which was a city in the current country of Turkey right now, Göbekli Tepe. It was a city, an ancient city, about which we know that there's been many discoveries. It's a city that we have the most knowledge about in the past, or the oldest city, and in the history of our civilization, according to the registration, starts about 5,400 years ago with the invention of writing by the Sumerians in the Sumerian tablets, and our technology and industry and machines actually took off after the invention of the steam engine. But obviously, this would have happened thousands of years ago, but it actually only started about 323 years ago. We actually made our first steam engine only 323 years ago. All of this would have started thousands and thousands of years ago by Adam and Eve, and the planet would have been way more advanced today. But that's not the case. The Urantia book tells us, and it arrived 87 years ago, and we know that it's actually, we've had many things that have happened differently, and we know that the book was actually delivered before its time. Obviously, this book is meant to transform society, and it is going to help us prepare for the magisterial coming of the sun. We know that this will happen, but later on. So what we have today, this is going to be that we're, and the issue here is to focus on peace, happiness, and faith. The Urantia book reveals about the progress of civilization. So are we progressing? Is it true that we're actually going backwards into a nominal world? Let's evaluate that. It says that economy, society, and government have to evolve as well if they want to remain pertinent. Static and stagnant conditions and evolutionary worlds will make a world go backwards. You have to have movement forward. Document 71 teaches us, and the book gives us a list of the progress that a civilization should have. First, we have to conserve individual liberties and human rights. As human beings, what do we have about this? We had the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Individual liberties have been mentioned here from the UN that happened in 1948. The book also talks about the protection of the law, an experience that we have in Brazil. We have a constitution that protects home, the protection of the home. The home is the center of the family. So we have the protection of family, protection of the home, the protection of the child, and to the older adult as well. Number 3 talks about promoting economic security. This is also in the Brazilian Constitution in Article 170, the Brazilian conditions, and preventing illness. And how are we doing here? Let's talk about the worldwide level and preventing diseases, these types of things. I know there's been many vaccines and many campaigns against different diseases have been done. There's been a lot of prevention work done, and the world has evolved somewhat in that regard. Many diseases have been eradicated. A lot of child deaths have actually decreased in most places, and we can truly believe that the world is progressing somewhat or at some people could say it's a fast speed about preventing certain or we're controlling certain disease. Right now we're dealing with a scenario of a disease that it's lethal, yes, it has severity, but we're working on it, and human beings are learning from this. Number 5 talks about mandatory education, and here I can say, and here I can talk about Article 6 of the Brazilian Constitution, that all childs have to go to school. This is not an option. School is mandatory. They're forced to study. This education is compulsory. 6, and in Brazil, at least, compulsory people are not forced to work in Brazil. It can never be compulsory work, and hobbies have to be an option for people. Number 7, we have, for example, sports are healthy practices. Practicing sports are important. Number 8, taking care of the people that are less favored. There's laws that take care of the underprivileged and serve certain people that feel from certain weaknesses. Number 9 talks about the perfection of the races, and this is an issue that may be controversial. I don't really identify. I have certain information about certain countries that are dealing with it. Right now, I'm not. I don't really know of any country that is perfecting the race currently, even though we've had some in the past. And promoting science and promoting philosophy and wisdom. There are very few countries that are working on philosophy and wisdom, which is number 11. And number 12, talk about cosmic discernment. And here we can talk about the Urantia book, which is the greatest tool that expands our knowledge and experience. The book itself says, and the intention is to promote growth, spiritual growth. So, of course, if we look at the 12 items and understanding the facts that demonstrates the progress of civilization, then we can say that the world is progressing. Many of these items, we're able to identify them, and they're promoted by the different governments of the different nations throughout the world, with certain restrictions, obviously. If people look at today, we see a lot of people saying the world used to be better in the past. The world is terrible today. Too many drugs, too many violence. But in that aspect, in that sense, freedoms and human rights, and we see that human rights have progress, and it has opened up a lot of space so that people can actually begin to do bad things. That is true. But what have happened with all the good as well? For example, let's look at 100 years ago. 100 years ago, precisely, almost to date, we had the invention of insulin. That was 1921. And who was alive in 1921 here? A person had, if the person had diabetes 100 years ago, they would die. There was no treatment at the time. Insulin was only discovered 100 years ago, and it became more popular many years after that. So, and now let's look at 1923. Then pension funds started to be invented. There was a lot of battles in that time. In Portugal, for example, we had a war, the last war in Portugal in 1920. Countries such as Uruguay, we had lots of different health battles as well. And there was a law that allowed battles to actually happen. TV was actually invented in 1926. And I put some points in red to show about certain significant aspects that we have and actually lead us to actually have longer lives. Like we first discovered insulin, then penicillin in 1929, and that allowed us to treat infections. And there was no way to treat infections before penicillin. And then we discovered, I'm trying to talk about medicines for a second. And we discovered analgesics in 1935 and human rights in 1948. And contraceptives in 1960, 1962, satellites. How many people today remember these problems? In 1967, we discovered heart transplant. How many people have benefited from all of this? Before, any heart problem used to be almost a death sentence, but the world has improved. Now let's look about 200 years ago, about 1821, 1826. Look, we were just beginning to learn about certain aspects like photography. And look, in 1942 was the first year where we started to discover anesthesia. People used to have to go through any surgery in really suffering conditions. Could you imagine being operated on without anesthesia? In 1988, that's when slavery ended in Brazil. In 1895, they discovered X-rays, which was very important for treating many different issues. And electricity was only started to be used at residential level in 1909, and many other things actually happened that we have to be thankful for, and that happened just only 200 years ago. And if we would have not had these benefits of these learnings, we would never have seen the benefits we have today. Now let's look at more than 200 years ago. Like universities actually has started to happen in 1150, and glasses in the year 1270. And we had many different discoveries that took hundreds of years to happen. We see when they discovered actually bacteria and vaccines until 16 and the 1700s. And these have helped millions of peoples. And so in 1796, we had 1796, we found the first vaccines, and that was for a virus. And you can see all the discoveries of many different vaccines on our right. And others have helped us mitigate certain diseases. And many of these diseases can continue because maybe some people did not have access to those vaccines. There's been a movement, and there are certain movements, and people have not have access to certain vaccines, and this had allowed certain diseases to not be eradicated completely. To complement what I spoke about, I want to show you guys a video. We have to understand how the world has evolved in the last couple hundred years. I'm not sure if I can play the video here. I'm going to try to. Give me a second. Let's see if I can share it. I'm not sure if it's possible.
É vídeo rápido, mas prestem bastante atenção na legenda.
It's a bit quick, but you can actually read the subtitles. It only takes about less than 5 minutes.
Bom, pessoal, espero que vocês tenham conseguido ver o vídeo. E para encerrar e concluir essa apresentação, eu quero compartilhar com vocês um texto que diz que Urantia está agora agitada e à beira de uma das suas épocas mais assombrosas e encantadoras, de reajustamento social, de estimulação moral e iluminação espiritual. Então, apesar de tudo, apesar de haverem ainda algumas manchas negras, mas o fundo está cada vez mais branco. Mantenhamos, então, portanto, a paz, a alegria e a fé. Muito obrigado, pessoal.
Parabéns, Nemias. Gostei muito da tua apresentação. Realmente foi um show, um estímulo aí e mostra para nós
Thank you. Congratulations. Your presentation was great. This was wonderful. So why don't you send us a link of the video? I really like that video. I would really like to watch it in further detail. Can you send us a link via the chat? And congratulations for your presentation. I really liked it.
¿Algún comentario?
Does anybody else have any questions or comments? Well, congratulations, Nemias. While you guys think about any questions or comments, I simply wanted to tell everybody that I really loved that positive vision. For me, it's a true vision. I really liked it. Thank you very much.
Se eu puder fazer adendo.
So can I add something about what I presented, since we have a little bit of time? I wanted to say that maybe I spoke a bit less than what I should have, but oh well. We have a few people that have certain visions which are still very pessimistic about the world today. There's still a lot of people that are negative, but maybe that comes from our Christian heritage, our inheritance, that believes and thinks that the world is worse today. But the Urantia book always talks about a vision of hope that the world continues to progress, that it continues to be part of an evolutionary progress, that we have to continue to learn, continue to grow, and we're in that correct path right now. So the Urantia book actually opens up our eyes that it's coming out and it's promoting transformation and the necessary transformation and progress for the arrival of the magisterial son. Obviously, this is going to take some time. It's not going to happen overnight. I understand that. In fact, Adam and Eve, even with all the training and capacities that they had, it would have taken them 25,000 years worth of work so that they can finally have the magisterial son to be bestowed upon the world. So we know that this is something that's going to require patience. It's going to require for waiting. Today we are dealing with disease and many other things. But why? Because God allows viruses to happen. And some people think that virus is sent by God or is it sent by Satan? No, we know very well that the Christian faith may sometimes blame spiritual faces on these, but these are parts of evolutionary world issues, and these are tests that the world has to go through. And obviously, in certain things, the Bible talks about these things, and these knowledges are also true, but we have to understand that these things will always happen, have always happened, and they're part of how a world progresses. We've had many epidemics in the past and way worse pandemics because we didn't have the technology that we have today, nor the tools that we have today. And like we had the Black Plague, and we had different types of plagues in the past, the Spanish flu. We had way worse things than what we're seeing today. These were really, truly difficult diseases because we didn't have a way to confront them. But technology today is allowing us to actually understand diseases much better with more information, and we understand viruses today. We understand how to fight them. So, well, obviously, many experiences that we're seeing today are going to help us to continue in our path of learning to possible future events or maybe epidemics in the future, pandemics that may appear in the future. Obviously, we're consistently learning. What we do know is that Adam and Eve would have corrected many of these weaknesses that we have today related to bacteria and viruses and microbes in the past if we wouldn't have had the default. But they failed, they defaulted. So now it's our role, now it's our duty to actually face and overcome these things ourselves. It is us that have to combat and overcome these diseases. There will come a day where we ourselves will be way more able to combat these things, but this will take time, obviously. And these are lessons that we have to learn, and slowly by surely we will evolve. And there are many people working at this particular moment and understanding this. And I remember that the book says during a worldwide crisis, many reserves from the finality reserves will be awakened to act in favor of humanity when needed. So I believe that maybe there's many reservists acting right now to help humanity to overcome any of these difficulties that we're seeing today in terms of pandemics. And I know that this will be overcome. So we are not so subject to all of the negative effects. Thank you very much. We have a person with their hand raised, and then you can go, Flavio. Perry first.
Thank you.
Hello. Thank you, everyone, for being here. It's wonderful. I just want to put since you're talking about the history and the effects of the rebellion and how we're all dealing with it or not, I had a thought the other day that I've been thinking a lot about the term sophistry and what that means. And I've got a whole list of words that it means, that are associated with it. But the thought that came to my mind is that particularly in the United States for the past 4 years, there has been a real divide. And my thought is, what if the last 4 years was an education in how to recognize sophistry and thereby to stimulate final choices regarding the rebellion? We are told in 54:5, number 8, that all affected beings are to weigh in as part of the adjudication. Just putting that out there for your thinking.
Thank you, Perry. Flávio, pode falar. Obrigada.
Flavio, you can speak. Well, thank you very much. Nemias, a very good talk. It was very motivating. It was very optimistic. That's how things have to be for us. They have to be optimistic for us, the readers, especially those of us that understand that this is an evolutionary progress, that obviously things are happening in our planet, but this is going into progress. And obviously, yes, you showed us the last 200 years, which is interesting. And we see the evolution for 200,000 years. And we see fantastic evolution in technology in just 200 years, and science and many different technologies. So we're also starting to see more spirituality in modern worlds as well, even though some people may not see it. And this is certain corrections that we are doing little by little. And this pandemic, etc., and these things that are afflictions, obviously, are also contributing factors to help us grow spiritually. So I do think that obviously this gives us a sense of building more awareness and understanding that we have to know that we can that we have to actually never lose sight of things. Obviously, scientific evolution is very important. Science is fantastic, but obviously, people have to find a balance between spirituality and science, and the growth of civilization has to have a balance. We have to obviously focus on social growth and harmony as well. So that future also has to be much better. Obviously, many people have limitations in terms of vision. It seems like this world at this moment And obviously, we're going through many crises and many secularism and many different things and many violence, etc. These are things that are out of the common and they're abnormal. However, obviously, there's a plan behind this world as well, even though all the rebellion. So I think that our future, the long-term future, is already predetermined, even if we have ups and downs in the meanwhile. So thank you very much.
Obrigada, Flávia.
Thank you, Flavio.
Alguém mais?
Anybody else? Do you have any questions or comments?
Gostaria, Nemias, de dizer alguma coisa para
So,
finalizar essa
Nemias, if you wanted to say some final words or some final remarks.
parte.
I have a comment. Please go ahead. You can speak. Go ahead. Great. This critique that the world is in bad shape in general comes, or I've heard this more from Christian brothers of any Christian institution, that the world is in bad shape. And well, I don't need to explain everything that Nemias explained that led us to believe that we're actually better shape than it's like the Christian world is not conscious that God is actually the true government. If they remember that God is truly governing us, then things would actually be better for them, because God does not fail. God is not a man. God cannot fail. So yes or yes, things will always be better because God governs, and it's something that we have to always remember. That man is not the true governor, even though it may seem that way sometimes. So there is no real failure in the long term. Thank you, Nemia, once again.
Obrigada, teacher. Nemias, por favor.
Eu vou apenas comentar uma pergunta que foi colocada.
I wanted to comment on a question that I read in the chat. Can you tell me about the virus? And do you think that this is a spiritual matter or a material matter? The arrival of the virus. And please comment. That's what this says in the chat. Okay. Well, we live in a decimal planet, remember. And remember, experimental decimal planets, it is allowed for things to happen. And they allow natural evolution to happen. And remember that life carriers, at the beginning, when life started, they identify certain planets where they allow certain microorganisms to act. And these things are seen if they're actually good or bad for humans. So we shouldn't really give too much importance of that era or that stage, because they know that with the arrival of the material sons like the Adams and Eves, then all of this would be solved. That's why they allow these viruses and these bacteria to grow, because they know that these biological elevators would obviously help us to support any of these different microscopic organisms that could potentially evolve from the life plasm, such as viruses and bacteria. They knew it would not be a threat after Adam and Eve. The only problem was that all the things happened. Adam and Eve were actually defaulted, and that means that these attacks, and we did not get the life plasm that was necessary. But many of these things are part of evolution. All of the living beings in this planet are trying to live and evolve as well. Vegetable life, animal life, all of us are evolving, and we're adapting to and resisting. The bacteria also evolved, the virus also evolved. So that's what I'm seeing. So obviously, there's always going to be a fight to evolve and progress, very probably. So obviously, it's part of nature. If we have a fight of a tiger always has to fight to if a tiger and us were there, do you think a tiger would not eat us? Of course he would eat us. It's normal. They have to eat to survive. So these are just natural things in nature. In Africa, every single day in the morning, the women know that every day human beings wake up knowing they have to go out and farm and make food, and every day we see a zebra and a lion. The zebra wakes up in the morning and says, I have to run faster than a lion. And every day the lion wakes up in the morning and says, I have to run faster than the zebra. That's just part of life. So obviously everybody adapts, everybody learns new attacks, everything, including viruses in all of us. So this is all about survival. Everything is an evolutionary course. And this has nothing to do with spirituality. There is no spirituality to this virus. There's nothing. These viruses are just living according to their own realities, and each creature or whatever creature is trying to adapt in their own manner as an evolutionary course, which is natural for any being, whether bacteria, virus, animal, or human. And this is natural. It has nothing to do with spirituality. So obviously we have to evolve ourselves and protect ourselves and do everything in our power to evolve ourselves and to actually protect ourselves and protect our health from their attacks. However, we know that this is a process. Thank you, Nemias. We have three people raise their hands: Enrique, Marley, and John.
Vamos falar minuto, pois já precisamos fechar essa palestra. Pode fazer.
We don't have much time. You can speak. Thank you. Nemias, your presentation was very good. Thank you very much. I only wanted to take advantage of this time to comment and say what a shame that the apparent delay that we have due to the rebellion and due to the faults of our Adams and Eves. But obviously the revelators also tell us, and we need to remember that in many ways we were actually very benefited more than what we think with these rebellions in a spiritual sense. So I wanted to remind everyone that if it would not have been for these occurrences and these rebellions and these setbacks, then most probably we would have never had Maccabentum Melchizedek nor Jesus. We would have never had our sovereign Michael come to our decimal planet were it not for this rebellion. And this legacy is unsurmountable. This is not a catastrophe. That is actually a privilege. So thank you very much, Nemias, for a magnificent job. Thank you, Enrique. You can speak. Okay, good afternoon for everyone. A part of the book and a document, I can't remember, I think it's 119. It says, I have a question about this. How does free will fit into all of this? How much does free will intervene in that necessary evolution? Up to what point can we be better off? And are we not going through a crisis at this moment due to free will? Oh, but obviously we're having a worldwide conclusion, a serious discussion. So we don't have the due evolution. Thank you. That's a question. Thank you, Marlon. Nemias, did you wanted to say something else? Well, I understood, if I understood correctly, that we're trying to understand that the universe, we're immersed in the universe, that the planet has to go through a process, and that many other creatures that lived before us were actually sacrificed so that we would have what we have today. So obviously, there as evolution and human beings will progress in the future, but we understand that we are going through certain moments. That is true. That there's no real error in this process. Everything that happens and everything that happened before was important for us to actually evolve to where we're at today. And what we're doing today is going to help us evolve toward a better humanity in the future. And people have to understand that. And we have to understand that obviously we play a role and it's not going to be easy. And we have to help the progress and evolution, but it's not easy. But obviously this is part of life, and we have to face life with courage, with faith. And we have to understand that we're part of the process. Obviously, the process is not perfect, but if things would have been perfect, then they just would have created us like the planets in Havana that are perfect from the very beginning. We were meant to actually progress from animalistic natures and actually evolve.
John, you can speak, please.
Buenas tardes. I have put in the chat a reference to paper 65, the over-control of evolution. And I would urge you to review that paper because it contains an explanation of what we are going through right now with the pandemic of a virus that seemingly springs out of nowhere and affects the entire human race. So, by the way, thank you very much for a wonderful presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Muito obrigada, Nemias.
Thank you very much, Nemias. Did you want to say some final words very briefly, Nemias? No, I only wanted to thank you for allowing me to participate in this Urantiathon. Thank you very much, and I'll see you the next time. Stay with God. Be with God. And thank you, Nemias, for an optimal presentation.